Commissioners, I see in the audience today, we have Merritt Matheson and we have Jackie. Um, We'll go right into the program for today. And the first speaker has been a past St. Lucie County Commissioner, was on the County Planning and Zoning Board for about 15 years. And is probably best known for his humility. So I've been asked to talk about the importance of voting, the importance of, in particular, down ballot voting, and how to select the right candidates. And there's a couple of things we need to remember before we get into details. People much smarter than I have said in the past, while democracy is messy and very inefficient, we've really never found anything better. And voting is the key to democracy. On the other hand, the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. So getting educated voters is key, especially down ballot. As we experience here, about 90% of the decisions that are made that affect you on a day-to-day basis are made by people, elected officials on the lower half of the ballot at the county and municipality level. And yet about 90% of the printed information that you receive about candidates is really about candidates at the federal and state level. So the toughest thing really for us with our water-related goal and mission is getting the local voters educated on who supports our mission. Of course, the best method to do that is to tell people that what they really need to do is get in touch with the candidates, get in touch with the incumbents, speak to them, find out where they stand on the issues, what they'll do in their next term or their first term in office. But time doesn't allow that to occur for most of us. And it's a shame because most of those people would welcome the opportunity to speak with an educated voter. But there is something that does make sense, and that is if you talk to the people who have the same goal and mission and ask them who they recommend, you can find out about people that you don't know about. In Martin County, it used to be a fairly simple process. I know you could call Maggie, Donna, Ginny, or Sarah in Martin County, and you'd get the answers. Who is the best for the environment? Who is the best for water? And all of them loved talking to voters, and all of them would pass along the information willingly. Unfortunately, that group is down to 3 now, although I personally am fairly certain that Jackie will fill Maggie's slot real soon. Of course, the idea of quizzing the group I think of as Martin County's 4 leading ladies isn't the right answer in St. Lucie County, but the concept is the same. For any races, you don't have sufficient information to make a sound recommendation. Talk to those you trust to have the same goals and seek their advice. Don't think of that as an imposition. Well, I've been out of office for more than 10 years now. There's a cadre of people that call me every 2 years and never talk to me any time other than every 2 years and ask who I think they should be voting for. Nobody ever asks me who should be president or who should be governor, but people ask me in St. Lucie County who to vote for on the down ballot elections. And if you can get past the idea of voting a party ticket and vote for the people who have the knowledge and the ability to move us toward our mission goals, we'll be a whole lot more effective in getting things done. You don't have to boldly tell people who to vote for. You can recommend they pay attention to newspaper endorsements if you believe that the newspaper philosophically is looking in the same direction that we are. There's one other thing. Now, starting 2 years ago and running forever, I hope, you can aim them to the Vote Water website, which is very, very narrowly focused. The Vote Water website works very hard to select the candidates whose mission is the same as ours, the Rivers Coalition. If you do nothing more than direct the people that you can influence to just go and look at the Vote Water website before voting, particularly in the local elections, we'll all be a whole lot better. And the next speaker can tell you a bit more about getting to that website. Blair, you're on.
Thanks for coming here. It's clearly a busy time of the summer. Everybody's got something going on, but the one thing that, again, I wanted to talk about. I'm Blair Wickstrom. I'm president, actually, of Vote Water and senior editor of Florida Sportsman magazine. The key, I think, in reference to what Charles was talking about, in reference to, is that elections matter. And in terms of what we are trying to influence and trying to be involved in, is something that's very important to all of us, and that is a clean and healthy environment. It's a clean and healthy economy. It's a way of life in Florida. And so I think in terms of the idea that we have to fight for this, it really shouldn't be as big an issue as it ultimately is. It seems like a no-brainer. You're in Florida. Why wouldn't we have clean water? Why wouldn't we have healthy water? Why wouldn't we have a situation where the economy, which is driven by the people that come to our state, why wouldn't it work for all of us? Unfortunately, we have special interests, AKA polluters, that have far more influence at the local, state, and federal levels than I think than you guys can imagine. I was told on a visit to the state capitol by a state senator when I asked about how is it that we aren't making these decisions, and she basically said, you guys are not here. And we don't have 24/7 access to these state representatives. And so we have to make it a priority where we can, how we can. And so what we've got is a political problem, and it needs a political solution. Charles referenced it in reference to the ability to find politicians that will prioritize water. Not everybody is prioritizing water, but we do have some people that say, I'm for clean water, But that doesn't show us what we need to see. It doesn't really evolve into the kind of votes that we need. We have got a major issue, and I think essentially what we're seeing today is a result of finding some politicians that actually prioritize water. If we want an elected official, I mean, we have some photos that we're showing on the screen. The politicians that prioritize water, they have to prove it. They have to show us. They have to have public announcements. They have to fight for, in the case of a county commissioner, they have to fight for state funding. They have to buy appropriate land. They have to put together a scenario where we have money to do this. In the case of a 0.5-cent sales tax increase, in the case of fighting with LOSUM, to make sure that the state is prioritizing. That's where the county officials can work and need to work. I think in reference to all three levels of government, I think it's one of those things where all of it has to work together. It's not one of those things where we can have it to where it's just the county, it's the city, it's the state, it's the federal level. I think in reference to the city, it's more important that it's a year-round effort, an advocacy effort. It can't be just when we're seeing discharges. It has got to be year-round. We have got to have all the disposal, the information at our disposal, but at the same time, it's got to be one of those things where it's a ongoing effort. I think it's important that we have officials that are not only going to sort of to speak the walk, but walk the walk. One thing I've found in fishery management over the years is that the people that understand the water, the people that are out on the water, they understand it the best, and they're going to be the best at advocating for our water and for our resources. So if we can have an elected official that understands the water, that spends time on the water, they will be a better advocate for us. And so in terms of how we move forward, it's at all levels. It's essentially finding the political will to make these decisions that are going to make our lives better. And so again, it's one of those things where we need it at both the city, the county, and the federal level. The federal level is where a lot of the decisions are made in terms of stopping the discharges. It's management of this system that we need essentially congressional oversight, congressional control. We need legislation that is meaningful, impactful, and will be voted on. And it doesn't happen just from the congressional office. It happens both from the city, the state, all levels of government, plus the constituents all working together to try to make this a situation where Congress is working for us. And it won't happen unless we, again, prioritize water. And that's what we're trying to do with organizations like Rivers Coalition, is to find the political will of elected leaders to make a difference. And right now we have a bill that has been passed in the House, in the Senate, and it's waiting for the president's signature. It's part of our WRDA, the annual water bills. In this particular instance, it's got a northern estuary recovery plan for the first time. It's something that, again, those are the kind of things that we look for in elected leaders that show us that they prioritize water. Like Charles said, vote water is a very specific, it's a very narrow lane, but it's the fast lane if we want clean water. And we can't get too involved in all the other sort of stops along the way that may seem important, and they are important, but in our particular lane, it's clean water. And we have to find people that are prioritizing that. And that's what we're doing with Vote Water. That's what we're trying to do and encourage elected leaders at all levels to prioritize water. And so that's what we're working towards. I had a video. I don't know if it was able to load. It's not again, it's not an endorsement. We can't get involved in campaigns. As a 501c3, Rivers Coalition cannot get involved in particular campaigns like Vote Water can, but we can highlight the kind of things that we hope to see, that we hope to have in our local representatives. This is from a news story. Do we have audio?
Coming across our state can change that situation very, very rapidly.
Congressman Brian Mast announced Tuesday the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee just passed a new piece of legislation. He says the Water Resources Development Act will not only improve water quality and combat harmful algal blooms, but it will also help workers who may have been exposed while on the job.
These individuals that are working out there, one, they shouldn't be exposed to it, but two, they should have a letter placed in their medical file denoting exactly what it is that they have been exposed to.
Some of the other provisions include $100 million to protect estuaries, a northern estuaries restoration plan, and a push for no more Lake discharges.
I personally will not accept toxic water being dumped into the community that I have the honor to represent.
The bill now waits for consideration by the full House. Mast hopes to have a vote in July. In Port St. Lucie, Angela Rozier, WPBF 25 News.
So again, it's not where we would potentially agree with every part of a person's platform and what they stand for, how they voted across the spectrum of votes. But what they've done in reference to clean water is where we feel we're going to make the most impact on political will. Because elections matter, but political will is more important. And if we get that, we have a chance at reversing how things have been managed for 5+ decades, but stopping the discharges to our estuary here. And then our next speaker, if all of this fails, if we can't get the political will, if we can't get our representatives to represent us and not special interests, AKA polluters, then we have to go an alternative route. It's a much more involved process. It's not an easy process, but that is a statewide initiative. It's a signature drive. And unfortunately, it is a place that we may have to go if we do not get representation that we hope to get. And so, Jim, you want to introduce our next speaker?
Yeah.
Sure.
I've been on your side a couple of times to get details on that stuff, but I get frustrated with it. They go on, I'm looking at, as far as recommendations, people for stuff like that, I get up the site every time I look for something that we should look for, I guess. Where you want to make a donation.
Well, we need donations, but Jim, I can tell you, we as a 501c3 organization, I can't promote the idea of the Vote Water voter guides even because they do get involved in electoral politics and endorsements. But the voter guides, from what I saw today, are up and live. So today, as of today, you can go, even though I'm not supposed to say that. I didn't say that. Okay. I know.
Yeah, so Joe Manasseh is a retired teacher who moved to Cape Coral, Florida. He serves on the Florida Rights of Nature, FORONN.
I guess I'll start all over again. nature is a voiceless stakeholder in this conversation, and it needs to be represented in a way that is effective and at a legislative level is representative of the issues, because we are part of an ecosystem. We're not alone. Joe Bonacia is the vice chair of the South Florida Regional Director of the Florida Rights of Nature Network, FRONN, and also the Rights of Clean Water. I will let Joe, who is a resident of Cape Coral, Florida, present the rights of nature and the rights to clean water. Joe, please take it away, and welcome to Stuart, Florida.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Pleasure to be here. Slight correction. I am no longer the vice chair of Florida Rights of Nature Network. I am the chair. My life was a heck of a lot less busy when I was vice chair. So I do live in Cape Coral. That's in Lee County. I'm on the other coast than you folks. And we are fighting for clean water just as much as you guys are, for as long as you guys have. So the previous speaker, I believe, was a former county commissioner. Well, this past week, a former Lee County Commissioner, Ray Judah, had an op-ed that was run several of the papers down here. And he corroborates everything that was just said. I just want to touch upon things real quickly here. Poor water quality in the Caloosahatchee River and our estuaries is a political problem and requires a political solution. Unfortunately, the Florida legislature and Lee County Commission have neither the will or courage to use their positions as elected officials to properly manage our waterways in the best interest of the public. Obviously, he's not alone in saying that. I have a book to recommend to everybody. If you haven't already read it, it's called A Toxic Inconvenience. It applies very much to everybody on both coasts in South Florida. It's written by Nicholas G. Penniman. His credentials are impeccable. He's currently the chair emeritus of the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, trustee of the Everglades Foundation, past chair of American Rivers, and chair emeritus of the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. You read his book, and he basically says that over the past 50 years, and he documents this, that our state, our legislature rarely, if ever, has shown the political will or the political courage to stand up to those special interests who have such a detrimental impact on our environmental policy and therefore on the condition of our waters. Commissioner Judah goes on to say, instead of supporting legislation or policies to restore and clean our precious water resources, they capitulate to special interests that funnel dark money into their campaign coffers. And then he goes on to talk about the insidious mismanagement of Lake O, leading to algae blooms downstream that are harmful to people, fish, and wildlife. I've been in the Floridian for the last 6 years. I came to Cape Coral, and all of a sudden I started learning about blue-green algae blooms and red tides. I should say I spent the first 60 years of my life on Long Island. Water is as much a part of the Long Islanders' psyche as it is down here in Florida. If I wasn't looking at the Atlantic Ocean, I was looking at Long Island Sound. Never in those 60 years did I ever see anything like I saw down here in 2018, 2019, with canals choked with blue-green algae, such as you guys have experienced, and literally tens of thousands of tons of dead sea life having to be pulled off our beaches down here. Back then we had a movie that was shown a lot. It's a documentary called Toxic Puzzle. Perhaps you are familiar with it. It was about Dr. Paul Cox, who's doing research linking blue-green algae, cyanobacteria, to neurodegenerative diseases. Just recently, it has been definitively linked to ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And we even had water summits. Our regional newspaper, the News Press, organized water summits. Did anything change? Well, I mean, we are always looking over our shoulder for the next 2018, 2019. As Representative Mass said, One storm, two storms, and we can be right back where we were. Last time I saw, Lake O was covered with about 45% of Lake O was covered with blue-green algae blooms. So the system isn't working. This is why back in 2020, voters in Orange County passed a right to clean water, rights of nature county charter amendments. It's important to note that it passed with 89% voter approval, which means no matter what the political background, educational background, economic status, everybody understands and appreciates the paramount importance of clean water. And so what happened next is also very noteworthy. Even before those voters got to vote on that bill, our legislature stepped in. This was at the time they were working on the 2020 Clean Waterways Act, and they snuck into that 111-page document a single sentence, which preempted the authority of local governments to pass rights of nature laws and rights to clean water laws. In fact, any right, the authority of local governments to give its citizens any rights regarding anything having to do with the natural world. I suggest that this shows the undue influence of special interests on environmental policy. The legislature who sponsored that language is a developer, and he got legislature of the year awards from the Florida Farm Bureau. I think we all know that agriculture is responsible for about 70% of nutrient runoff into our waterways, certainly to Lake O. It also shows, because they acted so fast, how effective they believe a rights-based approach to environmental protection can be. They were swift. Up in Ohio, it took 8 years for those folks to get around preempting rights of nature laws. It took 8 months down here in Florida, and they just didn't limit it to rights of nature. It's any rights for citizens regarding anything having to do with the natural world. So that was very effective. They snuffed out all other local initiatives throughout the state to follow Orange County's suit. I should say that there was a cause of action taken, a lawsuit filed up in Orange County with this amendment. A developer, after 89% of the population had approved this law, applied for a permit to build in wetlands for a development that would destroy 116 acres. Armed with this amendment, a citizen plaintiff, and for the first time in the nation's history, 5 bodies of water sued the developer and the DEP. What did they want? Well, they wanted the judge to order injunctive relief, which means developer, do not proceed, cause absolutely no harm until this is settled in court. And the other thing that they wanted the judge to order the DEP to enforce the Orange County law when considering a 404 permit, which would mean they could not issue that permit. This entire case was about state permitted harm. So at the hearing, I should say that the developer and the DEP asked the judge to dismiss the case. They said, well, the Orange County amendment law is invalid because the state preempted it. The judge, citing the legislature's authority to preempt local government law, agreed and dismissed the lawsuit. At this point, it seems very, very likely that the permit will be granted. 116 acres of wetlands will be destroyed. So that gets us to the effort that we are undertaking right now, which is to amend our state constitution with a right to clean and healthy waters for all Floridians. At this point, I want to go into some detail about it kind of quickly. I'm going to go to my PowerPoint because I want you to read parts of the amendment. Okay, so here's the ballot summary. Two of the most powerful sentences, environmental sentences I know of. This amendment creates a fundamental right to clean and healthy waters. I want to clarify, this is not a rights of nature law. It gives no rights to nature. It's simply giving rights to humans to clean and healthy waters. The amendment may be used to sue state executive agencies for harm or threaten harm to Florida's waters, which include aquatic ecosystems. The key word here is fundamental. Fundamental rights are the highest rights they are. Those rights take precedence over the permitted rights that the state gives polluters or others who would degrade our ecosystems. So the first paragraph in the body of the amendment is its purpose, and we're just going to read those highlighted in green here. Those words: waters sustain all forms of life. Clean and healthy waters protect and promote substantial interests, including human health, safety and welfare, native fish and wildlife, conservation of natural resources, outdoor recreation, aesthetic values, business opportunities, property values, and economic interests. Drop down a little bit. Consequently, to promote the interests of Florida's people, businesses, organizations, communities, and economies in clean and healthy waters, we are establishing this fundamental right. The point here is that clean water, as everybody understands, is of such vital interest in so many ways to Floridians that it merits the protection that a fundamental right for Floridians would provide it. We need this. Water is paramount, and we haven't been getting the protection from the system that is called for. Hence, we need this amendment. We've got to take matters into our own hands. We have the power to do this. It's in the first sentence of the Florida Constitution. What does it say? All political power is inherent in the people. The enunciation herein of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or impair others retained by the people. This is our document. We get to amend it when we deem it is necessary after decades of failed environmental regulatory oversight. We need to amend it now. I also want to highlight the last three words that are in green there at the end of the initial paragraph. This amendment, being a fundamental right, is indefeasible. What does that mean? It means that it cannot be overturned by the legislature. It cannot be altered. It cannot be compromised. I know that we have all witnessed citizens' initiatives, especially environmental ones, that were comfortably, if not overwhelmingly, approved by Florida citizens, only to see their intent undermined by the legislature. That cannot happen with this amendment. Aside from the fact that it is a fundamental right, we also state that it is self-executing. It is not dependent upon the legislature to be enacted. At this point, I also want to throw in that the primary author of this amendment is a retired Marine Corps judge advocate and environmental law professor. It took months and months and months to craft the language for this amendment. It was exhaustively researched and legally vetted, including those in Florida constitutional law. We know that once we hit 222,000 signed petitions, it triggers a Supreme Court review, which we welcome. We have to make sure that this is going to survive Supreme Court review. And so an awesome amount of environmental and legal thought and work into this. So What does it do? It prohibits harm. It shall be unlawful and considered a violation of the right to clean and healthy waters for a state executive agency, as defined herein, to harm or threaten to harm Florida waters by action or inaction, including by regulation, rule, policy, plan, standard, permit, practice, including management practice, activity, agreement, memorandum of understanding, order, or by inaction that permits harm or threatened harm about which the state executive agency knew or should have known. I apologize for the legalese here, but this is a legal document. And if it isn't written the way it needs to be written, then it will not be as effective as we need it to be. So what we need here is a definition of harm then. I noted that I'm originally from New York, so I was particularly happy when in November 2020, New York voters passed their Green Amendment. It was 15 words. It said all citizens have a right to clean air, clean water, and a healthy environment. They did not define what clean water is. They did not define what clean air is. They did not define what constitutes a healthy environment. So the effectiveness of that law is going to be held up in courts for a long, long time. We have studied green amendments in Pennsylvania, in Montana, and New York. We've learned from them. We've improved upon them. We've crafted a language especially to meet the challenges in Florida. So what is harm? Harm means the introduction of pathogens, contaminants, or toxins into waters, or the disruption of natural hydrological or ecological processes or functions of waters. This term includes, but is not limited to, such chemical, biological, or physical stresses to waters that contribute to unnatural water levels or nutrient loads, that remove, fragment, or degrade habitat of native fish or wildlife, that disturb vegetation or soil near the edge of waters, that introduce exotic or invasive species, that obstruct or divert natural flow, that overexploit native species, and that negatively affect the health of humans or of native fish or wildlife. Again, I apologize for the legalese language here, but it's absolutely necessary. I want to point out that these are higher levels of water quality standards than which currently exist, and they are focused around ecological processes. Here is a list of the waters that our amendment covers. It is quite an expansive list. It's as broad as it needs to be to provide the protections that are needed, because if we left any of these out, they would be vulnerable. We cannot let that happen. One of the last points I want to make, and I'm not covering everything in the amendment, it would take a long time, just the highlights here. Any violation under this section will be considered de novo. What the heck does de novo mean? It comes from Latin. It means from the new. When a court hears a case de novo, it is deciding the issues without reference to any legal conclusion or assumption made by the previous court to hear the case. That means it starts from scratch. Anytime a fundamental right is threatened, then the court must give it strict scrutiny, the most thorough review that the court can possibly give it, because fundamental rights are so important. It does not have to defer to what the DEP happens to say is good environmental policy or happens to be water quality standards. The court will bring in its experts, and it will decide from the entire spectrum of evidence presented what amounts to.
Can't hear Joseph.
You cannot hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm going to continue unless.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I want to provide you with some answers, because this was an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. Just yesterday, we received a whole list of questions from an environmental organization in Southwest Florida. They're obviously giving our amendment a great deal of consideration. they had some questions and they wanted answers. So I want to share those questions and those answers with you. I think you'll find that many will apply to your circumstances on the East Coast. Could a release of water from Lake Okeechobee into the Caloosahatchee that results in an algae bloom trigger a challenge under this amendment? Yes. There doesn't even need to be an algal bloom to trigger a cause of action under this amendment, as the result is known and provable. It's going to cause harm down here and over there where you are. We can file a cause of action even with that algal bloom. Once they announce that they intend to release, we can challenge that, because that is going to threaten harm to the Caloosahatchee or to the St. Lucie or to the Indian River Lagoon. What other types of actions by the state could trigger a suit under this amendment? Well, in general, a plaintiff can bring an action once there's sufficient evidence of harm or threat of harm to water sanctioned by state executive branch. Here are some examples. Permits that would allow development of a community with standard on-site septic treatment systems without sufficient buffering or mitigation designs. It's my understanding that a contributing factor to the poor quality water in the Indian River Lagoon has to do with developments that are being that are relying on septic systems, and obviously the leaching gunk into the Indian River Lagoon. But we cannot have more of those developments. If they're coming down the pike, our amendment can challenge those. Hooking up new communities to substandard wastewater treatment facilities, which would only add more stress to these facilities, which are already subadequate. We can challenge that. Divert or otherwise impact the natural flow of waters that may then harm downstream aquatic ecosystems and the lives they sustain. I'm throwing this in there because it's just reminding me so much of a problem elsewhere where a corporation wanted a permit to basically withdraw 1 million gallons of water a day from Ginny Springs. With our amendment, we can challenge that if we can prove that it's going to have a detrimental impact upon the springs or the ecosystems downstream. Could the issuance of a 404 or ERP permit trigger a challenge under this amendment? Yes. The issuance of a permit that violates the right to clean and healthy waters, or perhaps even the filing of it because it's a threat, could trigger a cause of action. Okay, so the text states that the section provides for equitable remedies against the actions or inactions of state executive agencies. How would the amendment protect against inactions? Well, here are some examples. We have best management practices. They're voluntary. If we have basically a trust and don't verify policy, the court could compel the state to change that and make them mandatory. Failure to fund or staff managing, monitoring, investigating, or enforcing functions of responsible state agencies. I distinctly remember reading articles in the TC Palm talking about how legislators know things aren't working, but they're not coming up with any money to change things. With our amendment, the court could compel them to provide more staffing, more monitoring, more investigating. Failure to hold creatures of the state to constitutional standards of water protection. This is south of you, but I distinctly remember reading an article regarding to Biscayne Bay, where there is now a partnership between the state and the county. The county's coming up with a restoration plan for at least part of the bay, and the state's responsibility is to make sure that the county enforces it. Well, those people down there say, we've been here before, we've had commissions. How are we going to be ensured? How can we ensure that the state is going to ensure that the county does what it says it needs to do? Well, our amendment can ensure the state fulfill its responsibilities. Summing up here, because I know I'm a little bit over time. You shouldn't just look at this as piecemeal. You got a problem over here, our amendment can fix it. You got a problem over there, our amendment can fix that. The intent is to make systemic corrections, case by case. So over time, it is highly likely the amendment will seldom be needed. I mean, after the state is taken to court several times, they're going to start getting the message that they have to change what they're doing. They have to provide greater protection in various ways to our waters. The state executive branch will be constitutionally forced into good decision-making for perpetuity. And the last thing I need to say here before opening it up to your questions, and I'll answer them as best I can, just to let everybody know, as the gentleman before me said, this is going to be a huge uphill battle, Herculean task. We need 900,000 signed and approved petitions by November 30th, 2023. The FRON board is comprised of under 10 people. We have Right to Clean Water ambassadors numbering right now about 100 people. We're expanding, but still, we will not be successful without the help of partner organizations to get their members to sign these petitions. Bottom line, it's a numbers game. We need petitions signed, and we need people to go out there and get petitions signed. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if there's time for questions, I'll answer questions as best I can. If anybody's asking a question, I can't hear it. I'm getting something in the chat. How can I'll just answer that question in chat. Yes, bit of an oversight on my part.
Yeah, just hold on a second. We got our microphone working. So really, thank you very much for your presentation, but I think the issue is here. The challenge is, what is Marine Resources going to do to help to promote this constitutional amendment, and how can we help to promote by getting signatures?
Is that a question you were asking me or the folks there?
The question, I think, was to the board of the Rivers Coalition is
Okay.
Can we support this? We are member driven and we cannot make pronouncements, but we can, if it's the flavor of our community, propose this and have a vote. It is something that is very timely and important. I know that the Indian River Keeper is very much engaged, as is the Waterkeepers Alliance, in promoting this. And so there will be local, driven efforts to get these petitions signed.
Well, that would be great.
Add to that?
I'm sorry, would I like to add to that? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yes, I mean, like I said, bottom line, we need petitions. Members of your organization could certainly start attending our meetings. Florida Rights of Nature Network meetings, they're on Thursdays. They become Right to Clean Water ambassadors, so they can go out and promote this individually as much as they want to. The other thing I wanted to add, because again, the earlier gentleman was speaking about federal, clean water regulations and stuff. Next fall, the Supreme Court is going to be hearing a case which is going to give them the opportunity to redefine the definition of wetlands. A lot of people expect that they're going to define it in such a way that they're going to open up millions of wetlands to harm. It is important to note that state constitutions are going to be more important than ever. If we had a Right to Clean and Healthy Waters amendment in our Constitution, it would still provide protection to the wetlands that they need, regardless of what the federal government ends up defining wetlands as. It would be our definition of wetlands. that counts. And similarly, if the EPA is hamstrung in other ways, again, we at the state constitutional level can provide the necessary protections.
Joe? Joe?
Yep.
You may want to differentiate when you have the concept of a algae bloom in the Caloosahatchee or anywhere. Some algae blooms are beneficial. The toxic algae blooms like the cyanophytes, the blue-greens, those are the dangerous ones because a diatom phytoplankton bloom and a chlorophyce bloom are very beneficial as the basis for the food web of whatever system they are operating in. So you may want to differentiate that in your rules.
Thank you very much.
The language could easily be harmful algal bloom. And that would cover both cyanobacteria and harmful algal blooms, but it's just an HAB as opposed to an algal bloom. Right.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question. How would we get petitions over on our coast?
Okay, well, we have regional coordinators. The one for the Southeast is Tiffany Grantham. And if somebody, I'm going to put my my contact information in the chat. All you have to do is contact me and I will put you in contact with Tiffany. She's got thousands of blank petitions and we will gladly put them in your hands. And you can work with her about collecting petitions, getting them back to her. Eventually, all petitions have to end up to the appropriate supervisor of election offices, depending upon county.
Excellent. Yeah, it's going to be on the chat room and we can.
I'm gonna put it in right now.
Excellent. We'll migrate it into our newsletter as well. Are there any more questions for Joseph? We're running low on time. Okay. Thank you very much, Joseph.
My pleasure again. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you all today.
Thank you, all of our presenters. Very newsworthy and enlightening. Diane Hughes, Lady D is about to retire. I don't know what we're gonna do without her. Yeah, well, we do have John, and John, are you gonna?
Yeah. I'm going to take Diane's spot this morning, primarily because I do want to acknowledge the nearly 10 years of great service that Diane has committed to water quality in Martin County and an entire career of protecting Florida's environment and water quality. And we're going to miss her dearly. We hope she stays in touch, but she's been a huge, huge addition to the fight here in Martin County. So thank you, Diane. And I'll keep it short. I've got a brief update from Martin County. I think it'd be interesting. I want to make this comment. If there was a study done between the inverse relationship between attendance at the Rivers Coalition and water quality in the river and estuary, I think this tells you all you need to know about current conditions. Oh, hey, okay. Thank you for showing up. And I'm sure they were applauding Diane as well. So yeah, things are great. I don't have to join the chorus of accolades for the current conditions, but I do want to point out, particularly since Lieutenant Colonel Polk's here, a few things that we want to acknowledge for the Corps in this season. First of all, was the decision to work with the Water Management District to continue to provide those beneficial flows to the Caloosahatchee throughout the dry season. Certainly helped. We'd love to see that be a regular thing. And then really it came as a profound surprise that they were willing to draw down the C-44 reservoir to create that capacity for the wet season. Being someone who works with project managers, I know the constraints of trying to get contracts completed and their testing protocol to finish that up. There would have been a lot of incentive for them to continue with their filling and testing, and drawing it down has created enormous capacity. I can't believe that it's nearly August 1st. The lake's at 13 feet and we've got 60,000 acre feet of storage that could potentially draw 11 or even up to 1,300 CFS if there is local basin runoff. We're in a really, really good place this year. So thanks to the Corps, thanks to Mother Nature. Mother Nature seems to be implementing her own lake recovery mode, and so we're grateful for that too. Yeah. So let's pray, dance, whatever you do to keep that one working for us too. Couple of quick updates from the county. The county just this morning, really a few minutes ago, thanks in part to a lot of Diane's hard work over the last year, submitted our county's 20-year needs assessment to the legislature. House Bill 53 year ago created a mandate for each county to roll up all the municipalities, the independent service districts, special districts, water quality needs for the next 20 years into a single document. And then the legislature is going to use that to inform funding decisions going forward. They get inundated with member requests, individual projects every session, increasingly, particularly as they've, as the funding has gone up. And the idea is that they would create some formulaic funding mechanism, somewhat similar to what the DOT enjoys for meeting water quality needs in Florida. And I think that's a great thing. The county's highly supportive of that. And we just finished a pretty arduous effort of creating that first report and submitting it. It's massive, and it's for the state, it's going to be a pretty impressive roll up of needs for the entire state and water quality. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is, of course, we are up to our eyeballs now in reviewing the draft EIS. No big surprises yet, but we're gonna make sure Lieutenant Colonel Polk did his work, and we'll look at every letter and dot and tittle and look for. It's not just about making sure that the environmental impacts were adequately categorized and quantified, but it's also about preparing for that next lake schedule. That's really just around the corner. If as some of these projects are due to be complete, it's possible that we could start another process much like this in 26, 27. And what we do now in responding to the EIS could be critical in setting the stage for how we start.
So Ben Hogarth's had another meeting, but I wanted to, real quick, before I talk about LOSUM and what's happening here in the city commission chambers coming up, how important what we've seen over the past month in working with the Corps and how the C-44 has been regulated. That's bought our estuary a lot of recovery.
It's on.
Real quick, they've been regulating the C-44, working with Lake Okeechobee. We've seen no water flowing out of the S-80 structure when we get that western Martin County basin rainfall. And those numbers are as high as 400 cubic feet per second. And that's
Lake Okeechobee.
What John mentioned, the increased capacity went from the lakes at 13.5 feet forward to the ability
unless you factor in the seafood for that. What we're trying to do here is buy the recovery fund for our estuary, so that our seagrass flats start to come back, or start to come back. So, thank you for doing that, working with us to help us buy that recovery. Right now, we've seen, besides out of the North Fork, we've really seen the past one with our own tidal basin money. That's the thing we have to deal with ourselves, local water quality problem. Now, I want everyone to remember the date of August 17th, we'll be coming here for the next round of Wilson public engagement. Lieutenant Colonel Polk will talk more on that. But as far as Wilson and the city's been interacting with before, we've been really supportive of their model numbers of how the lake will be managed. Just like the county, we're still digesting the statistics that have come out. But our written comments so far, we have a real skepticism of the lake recovery. And that's when the lake has been at higher elevations, 17 feet plus or higher. And they want to draw down the lake for beneficial benefits to the lake ecology. That's improve the lake submerged water vegetation. We are supportive of that, but not at the cost to other our estuary, which have this. And that's where we're very concerned about the recovery. The recovery mode would trigger a drawdown, try and have the lake for more than 90 days below 13. That's what we're focused on our written comments right now with the board. We support that. But we support that in working with Mother Nature, not in the next following water. What we mean by that is if you can't draw the lake down, that's beneficial.
Thank you, Todd. So city's stance on that, and I'm going to try to put this in as general terms as possible. Our comments are a little more detailed. But we support that recovery mode, but only when it's working with Mother Nature to where you can achieve benefit for all stakeholders. Because trying to get the lake down from 17 feet to 90 days consecutively below 13 feet inevitably might lead to harm in the estuaries. Whereas if you stretch that out longer than a period of 1 water year and maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 water years, and that those high elevation periods give the Army Corps, say, a card to play that lake recovery mode when Mother Nature works with the agencies, then you can draw it down successfully to those lower levels to allow the submerged aquatic vegetation in the lake to rejuvenate. But you do that when it's a win-win situation to the estuaries as well as the lake. Because trying to do it too quickly when Mother Nature's not working for you, our skepticism of that is you might have a lose-lose scenario where you're trying to reach a goal that causes you to send regulatory discharges to the estuaries that are harmful, and you don't achieve your goal of drawing down the lake. And that's a lose-lose scenario. So that is the gist of what our comments have been to the Army Corps in this next phase of LOSUM. And keep in mind your date of August 17th. I'll let Lieutenant Colonel Polk describe that meeting that we're hosting here in our chambers, and I believe virtual as well. So thank you.
Jackie. Come on up here. To Mayor Matheson, yes. Go ahead.
It depends on, a lot of that variable depends on Mother Nature.
I'll ask it on the mic.
Mm.
Do you know how long it takes the lake to recover from a few months at 17 feet? I'll tell you, 5 years. We're still suffering from Irma. You want to tell me the last time we went 5 years without the lake going over 15.5 to 16 feet? I'll tell you, never. Do you realize that if you kill the SAV, which right now I think we're at 15% of what's supposed to be in the lake, and I think Paul Gray will be on later, perhaps he'll tell us more. Do you realize that you're getting ready to develop a mud hole? And when you do get a water sent down to the St. Lucie, you know what kind of water it's going to be? The muck that's in the bottom of that lake stirred up. It will be the dirtiest water you've ever experienced. I don't think people understand how dangerous this Lonesome is if we keep the lake over 17.5 feet and do not have a recovery period. And we need 5 years. We're never going to get it. Mother Nature don't give you 5 years.
Mr. Cook,
So
while I can't see you, I certainly recognize your voice and thank you for coming to Stewart City Hall and the Rivers Coalition meeting. I've been waiting 39 years for the St. Lucie estuary to recover, and my parents have been waiting their generations as well. I represent the city of Stewart, and I would love to see Lonesome have a 1 foot lower when we talk about lake height on the lower end of that scale. But I will readily admit this is not the location for this debate, and I'll happily have a cup of coffee with you afterwards. But I certainly, and on behalf of the city, we support the recovery, not at the expense of the St. Lucie River estuary.
A potential compromise. As Mayor Merritt can attest to, when you have a area of emergent aquatic vegetation along the shoreline, right now it's cattail at around 15 feet. If that was taken out and at 17 feet, and underneath that, you have the SAB to expand. You can keep it at 17. You could keep the lake somewhere in the 17 range. Not, and because I think the Colonel can attest to the fact that the hardening that was done could easily handle 17 feet and higher safely for a while, a long while. And then you would have a situation that you and I saw locally where the total coliform or the fecal coliform
Jackie, you want to?
I don't want to use them like that. This one? They're all on?
Anyone you want.
Is this one on? Testing.
No, just
Thank you. They say that the way survival occurs and the success of the South Florida Water Management District and the Army Corps in the future will be being able to adapt. So I would say that we've been learning to adapt to a dead mic. So my name is Jackie Thurlow Lippish, and I presently serve on the board of the governing board of the South Florida Water Management District. I'm a local girl. Like there's Becky out there, one of my, she's now a city commissioner, but a river warrior during the early days. And Diane, we're going to miss you so much. Good, good. I wanted to just bring up something beautiful and positive before we continue what we always have to talk about. which is trying to find a balance in an impossible situation. These pictures were shared by Lawrence Glenn, who's in charge of water policy, environmental policy for the South Florida Water Management District. And this is Moonshine Bay, which is the west side of Lake Okeechobee. And look at all those nesting birds. And this was really around, last month, but our meetings covered the month prior to our meetings. And it's very exciting to see all of these birds. Is there one more picture too? And look at the roseate spoonbills and others, the egrets, and that looks like a wood stork, I think. Is it? Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes when, all the fighting's going on, because that's what we do as humans, I think to myself, what else we need to be thinking about, which is God's creatures, which are the birds and the animals, because they live here too. And all of our decisions affect them too. And so even though some of us may be happy or may not be happy with where the lake is at this year, it was a good year for some of the birds on the west side that you can see in this picture. And something that we don't talk about enough, and I did not bring a copy of it, but they call it the ecological band. And the ecological band is the band on the lake that kind of goes up and down with the seasons. And that band would probably be higher than some of us, want in, because in the St. Lucie people. But the bottom line is, if you look at the natural system, like all systems in the world, things go up and things go down. And it's been a good year for the lake, I think, and for some of the wildlife on the lake, because they have remained in that ecological band, not thinking about people band or blowing out anything or whatever, but in the ecological band. And that makes me really happy. And we have to find the things that we're happy about and thankful for, so we can keep on fighting this very difficult fight that we continue to fight. Something that was brought up in here was I don't like the term at all, because my brother and I have tried to kind of steer it a different way over the years, the local basin runoff. There, with all of the canals that were dug for the Central and South Florida plan, it's really hard to define that. But yes, people think in terms of C23 and C24 and C25 as more of our local basin runoff. It's not from Lake Okeechobee. Nonetheless, it's shooting through, just like the old Kissimmee River, and killing everything as it comes down into the water. And it is happening right now. Please go online. I've talked about it before, but look up Indian River Lagoon South. We know that we just were lucky enough to finish out the C44 reservoir, which is what you all have been talking about today, with being able to hold some of the water possibly in that if we have a bad situation with Mother Nature. We are on our way, and Lieutenant Colonel Polk can tell you all of the energy that is going into building C23, C24, and C25. And almost everybody can take credit for this, especially the people who are already in heaven and have passed, such as Maggie Herchella. She was one of the original people in that original county commission, long before us, where they were fighting to fix that watershed. And now with them gone, this is starting to happen. I sat in on a conversation about the Interconnect Canal. Now, this is going to be controversial, but it's going to work. And the Interconnect Canal is part of Indian River Lagoon South, and the Interconnect Canal should be starting this year or next year. It is part of C23, C24, C25, C44, Indian River Lagoon South, that big, huge thing we have over here. And that Interconnect Canal will be a canal, I know, that is dug from the C-23 canal, which is the border of St. Lucie and Martin County, and it will be connected to the C-44 reservoir. And I'd like Colonel Paul, could you tell just a little bit about how the Corps is looking at this and how this is part of the Indian River Lagoon South, which is the bottom part and this top part?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And for everyone, yeah, again, Todd Polk, Army Corps with South Florida Deputy Commander. To answer your question specifically, yeah, that canal will allow that, exactly like you said, it'll allow the connection. Again, we don't like, yes, local basin runoff, however you wanted to describe that as opposed to just tidal influence for you, but everything that's in the local basin is what that will help control and help treat. Correct. Well,
It's not.
yes, this is outside that, right? And but it's still shooting to you. And this is what we're at least trying to our best to treat, store and treat before it does come into the system.
Right.
That's I think the main point there.
Right. So may I ask you,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
I think the answer is yes, that when all of these systems are finished, the C-44
Mhm.
reservoir that
Yep.
we've been talking about today, that will also treat in off times, it will be coordinated, but it will also treat water from the C-23, C-24, C-25 basin, mostly
Yeah.
C-23, C-24.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. More the southerly portion of, yes, so C3, 23 and 24. Of course, everything is going into the C-44 as it's been designed initially. But that's right. Yes.
Right.
It'll, so when we say operate it, like we're trying to, whenever we turn it on, operate it, it operates naturally. As John said, that's 60,000 acre feet, essentially, when you talk about the 50,000 acre feet that ultimately be in that reservoir, as well as could be in the STA, right? It always will go through that STA before it goes back into the canal regardless. So,
Thank you so much. And we really thank the Army Corps
thank you.
for everything that you continue to do for everywhere. But ladies and gentlemen, they are doing so much for our East Coast St. Lucie River. They deserve a round of applause.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Let me just hold tight. Or I'll wait till.
Are
you're
you up?
finished.
Okay.
Whenever you're finished, ma'am.
I'll just say that during our meeting, we discussed WERP, which is Western Everglades. There was an issue with the location of an STA. So that was something that came up. And we paid more money, a lot more money, and I support it, to reinforce basically the canal in the EAA reservoir. And
Yes,
maybe
ma'am.
you can touch on
Yeah,
that. Thank you so
absolutely.
much.
Yes, ma'am. So what we're talking about there was, as we develop, so she was referring to the inflow outflow canal for the EAA reservoir, and next to it, right, immediately adjacent to it, contiguous essentially, is the STA. What we found out though was that as we did, it wasn't, I just think, I was thinking, well, why didn't we know that before? How come we have to do a modification for $8 million this late in the game? But we realized as we went through the further design that we needed to have that filtration system into that canal that divides between the reservoir and the STA, and it's better to do it now than later, right? So as opposed to stopping construction or stopping once we have already hydrated that STA, which will happen here probably the next 2 years, go ahead, get it done now. That way, as the work on the reservoir begins and continues, we don't have to interrupt any of the STA work. Essentially, is what that allows us to do, allows the Mother Nature to do. So, let's see, real quick, and just quickly, if those of you aware on she mentioned WERP, so Western Everglades Restoration Plan, big one. We're doing our best to get that across the finish line to a tentatively selected plan up to Congress, and that one, for those of you who are aware, has been challenging in a lot of ways. It's a huge, enormous area, or by that I mean the size of Rhode Island, covering from just south of the lake, the big Cypress region on west. And the key is that you've heard these are stormwater treatment areas. Typically, they are always on already used land, whether it was a citrus grove, a prior sugarcane field, or cattle run. And we do have some areas that were frankly sited on top of virgin cypress. And so we're going to make sure that we don't, in the name of restoration, do any further damage or harm on a plan. Now, granted, again, this is a plan, but it's always incremental, because these plans are what go forward and carry us to authorization through Congress and funding. So the better we can make those initial plans and not have to try and mess with it later, the better on. But we're gonna get there, and we will definitely get there to make sure we're doing it the right way. I can hit very quickly on the lake, a couple of key things. Again, we're, happy to report, as you say, Mother Nature's cooperated. We're about even with where we were almost a month ago, sitting right at 13 feet negligible, right? Not much above or below. I think we're about 1.5 inches higher than we were 30 days ago, and 6 inches now lower than we were last year on this date. We've not pushed any water to the south, and for the most part, everything we're seeing, what's kind of keeping us in this right there is that daily evapotranspiration is still happening, because you're not seeing a whole lot of rain north in the basin, not a lot of rainfall on the lake itself. And so we've not pushed any lake water to the west on the sea out of the S77. Julian Keene locking down out of Moorhaven, nothing's gone west to the Caloosahatchee. They've been able to have those beneficial releases that they need from, again, their basin that touches to the Caloosahatchee. Here, same thing, of course, the east have zero flows, and as John mentioned, to about 13.5, 14 feet. As Mayor Matheson mentioned there, right? It's, as long as it's a physics problem, as long as we can backflow water into the canal, we'll do that. And then we've been able to lower the reservoir, as you said, about 4 feet. So it gives us about a 6 or so foot capacity, because right now we're still topping out at 10 feet, but shortly we'll be up to this full 15 feet height and 50,000 acre feet in the reservoir. So that is great. Again, hey, we're in August. we're praying. We're coming in August. Let's pull through August, September, and then we can maybe sigh. But right then, or sigh relief. But right now, obviously, bated breath for the rest of this season. But we do like where we're at currently. I will certainly hopefully Dr. Gray is going to be able to talk more ecological, because I'll let him kind of respond to your points on the lake. And obviously we need to know how long the recovery does take. As Mr. Cook mentioned, it takes a heck of a long time. But that ecological band, 12 to 15 feet, that's what we're shooting for, even with the recovery time. I think real quick on the current schedule change. I mean, really, again, no major changes going east or west or anything on the lake. It's just we're letting it sit where it is. And then as far as the engagements, hey, tomorrow is the official release date of the LOSOM EIS, and I'll hit a couple points on that real quick. But the key thing is, on the 17th, we will have an engagement here. I asked for a little bit of space before I announce exactly who all we can have attend to that, because if it's something that we host, we're still under a little bit of the COVID guidance on how many folks we can have in. But for certain, we will have a lot of leadership or elected officials and your staffs here to represent it. And if we can open the doors tomorrow, we certainly will. But give me a little breathing space on that answer exactly right away. However, at 1800, so part of the NEPA, so the environmental portion review, 1800, that'll be completely open. It will be virtual. News release went out today. I can pull it out later, but it should be going out in the TC Palm probably today. It was a full news release on the links, the phone numbers, how they log on or call in. But essentially, as you've heard, so it's a 45-day open comment period. So that you got till September 12th to submit comments. Of course, we're looking at everything from the county, the city. That's great. But anyone's allowed to submit them in. And like I said, there's a lot of stuff to wade through in that EIS. And of course, the operational schedule is really what we look for. Let me just make sure I have a couple of things. Yeah, that first appendix is the water control plan. So please, look through that. That's where we're looking for the feedback and the comments. A couple of things I'll just re-highlight on the significant changes to LOSOM right now as we stand from the 2008 from LORS. Eliminating the release of the St. Lucie estuary under normal conditions, sending zero lake water east about 95% or more of the time. Eliminating stressful releases to the Caloosahatchee. Again, providing better water supply to the Seminole tribe as part of it. Ensuring water quality is considered, and I think by our water managers. And I think that's a huge thing that was missing before. So regardless of where we hit, now that is something we have written in to take into consideration where it was not beforehand. And as Colonel Kelly used to say, he'll trust our decision making over a decision tree any day, and I completely agree with that. And let me just, I think I hit most of the notes there, all kinds of things. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. But always love to hear from the other experts like Dr. Gray when we talk about the lake. So, yes, sir. Is the owner. Yeah, it's a great point. Thank you. So as I can at least tell you just, and this is mainly coming from the DEP, the Florida DEP releases their daily report. And of course, we're all looking at the same data and imagery from satellite imagery of how the algal blooms are looking. As of yesterday's report was right around 20% of the lake, northwest portion had algae visible. I don't know what Todd's going to see in his, I know he'll have, I don't know if you'll see about the same thing, hopefully so. So, a little under 200 square miles. I mean, unfortunately, I don't think we've seen a major bloom come up. We've seen them first come up a little bit, and then we've had either at least the wind knock things back down. I think, quite frankly, we get a big flush of rain. I would expect we'll see a pretty big algal bloom again on the lake. But again, I think, we had South Florida was out of the ES92 structure when we had spiked real high at the middle of the month. Treated that. We've had South Florida has been ready at the ES77. I think we did not end up needing a treatment yesterday at the ES77 with just some trace algae that was at the gates, but they're ready to treat. But as far as ecology, yeah, I mean, we're just, again, kind of watching it to see what will happen as far as algal blooms come up and flare down. Absolutely, yeah. So I think the next big rain, we'll definitely see something after that. Yes, sir.
I think the weather is certainly part of what's keeping us lucky and without discharges, but I really think that the Army Corps' presence on the east coast of Florida in a much more dramatic way over the last couple of years is also part of that. And thank you very much, Colonel Pope. There's no other state agencies here, are there? I don't think so. Nick Mader's not here. Todd is not here. And so that brings us to Todd Thurlow for CBS.
All right, I think we're over time, so I'll try to be quick, and let me remember to share my screen this time. Just gonna share the whole screen. You see me up there? So you seeing it? Okay. So as I've been saying, the lake is at 13.04 right now as we stand here. It's been kind of, wrong screen there. It's been kind of bumping along at that for the last couple of weeks. So you see here on the Army Corps graph where it's just been kind of holding steady. There really isn't water coming in from the north. Kissimmee's closed. It's not bringing. I added a little tag to if you can see that bar up there, the net inflows. So when you're on that page, you can see what the net inflows are. So like right now, it's only 154 CFS. When they're talking about the evapotranspiration or however it's pronounced, that's going to evaporate that faster than it's coming in. And there's some direct rainfall on the lake. On the algal blooms, there's been clouds lately, but back on the 14th. This will refresh. There you go. Back on the 14th, there was a visible bloom. This is the HAB image of that. And so, that's how it's been around that time in prior years. But again, Mother Nature kind of cooperated and brought some wind and some clouds in and dissipated that. This doesn't show really well on the overhead, but if you go home on your home computer, it'd probably show up a little bit better. This is what it looked like on a infrared satellite imagery. So it was visible. That's really the only, the first time it was visible like that this year. So that was on the 14th. That red outline is 53 square miles. So by the next day, it was kind of pushed back down. Other things real quick. I added some other things on there if people need it. And I'll get into my seagrass report, which is what I'm supposed to do. let's see, I'll skip over that. There's some, rainfall came up in the last meeting, so I went ahead and just added, so it's not a couple clicks away. Jackie maybe can tell me who Arlen is, but I linked his page off the South Florida Water Management District. So, because they talk a lot about how it's not how much it rains, it's where it rains. And so when we got a lot of rain before last meeting, it was along the coast, and that's why the lake really wasn't moving. And you can see, and it's been fairly dry up in the Kissimmee. But like right now, you see that the Caloosahatchee has a lot of local basin, not a lot, but it's at 1386 right now. But that's all coming out of the basin. Nothing out of the lake. And so on that radar image I just had up there, you can see they've had some rain over on the West Coast. So the other link that's on here now is the Army Corps documents for LOSUM. So that's what they're talking about. If you wanted to just come here, I've got the link there for you. So you can just go straight into it. And then Jackie was asking about the ecological ban. It is right in that Appendix A. I had it on here, but maybe I closed it. Up there it is. That's the ecological ban that you were talking about. So go to page 12 of that Appendix A. It's right in there, but it's all in there. So go read it. Seagrass report. I finally got out on the sandbar after getting skunked offshore, or kind of skunked offshore. Went in and took a look at things. And so that's kind of where my photographs were. And the grass is coming back. I mean, it's amazing what'll happen when we don't get discharges. I was looking for a picture of the actual grass. Let me see if I can find one for you. There you go. And then there's lots of sand dollars and stuff out there too, and lots of little critters and birds. That thing, I just, the seagrass. Let me get back to my page here. This is the seagrass satellite imagery. So this was on the 23rd, which was just a couple of days ago. So you can see that patch of seagrass. That's where I was right there. And so these are grass coming in. And that little patch is about 12.4 acres, just so you get some scale there. So you can see what it is. So, 12 acres of grass there, that's probably more than 20 acres. I mean, so we have hundreds of acres of grass coming back in at Selfish Flats. Jackie's raising her hand. What's up?
It's up.
Go to 2. On now? Okay, I think we're good. Actually, I think that's it. Unless anybody wants to say anything particular. Lake's kind of holding steady.
As you probably know. And Todd is much smarter than I am as my little brother. Okay. He does all, but what he did this week, which was really cool, if he attached his photographs to where he's visiting on the seagrass beds so those pictures that he shows are the same ones connected to where he's visiting, where it used to be barren and now there's seagrass again. So Todd, you're an awesome little brother.
It's worth also noting that where Todd was taking those pictures of the seagrass, at one point there were 55 fish species in a 10-meter square. It's one of the most biodiverse hotspots on the planet. And if there's any spot worth protecting, it's those seagrass flats. 55 fish species in one 10-meter square is just like outrageous. I guess that's me now. I am the river keeper. The new Indian river keeper. We had a really good trash recovery in conjunction with the Treasure Coast Waterway Cleanup, sponsored by the Marine Industry Association and FIND. We were responsible for the Jensen Causeway pickup, and I think we had about 112 pounds of mostly cigarette butts. You guys who smoke really need to start picking up your butts. Nicotine is incredibly toxic to the environment. The butts themselves are bad for all kinds of reasons, but it's great to see the community come out and pick up their stuff. It's really a shame that people are still, not taking care of their trash. I often wonder whether just some signage that says, pack it in, pack it out might help too. I've had the pleasure of going up and down the lagoon between here and basically just north of Melbourne. There's recovery all over the place. It's happening, but we really need to keep the pressure on. These large scale projects are really doing a magnificent job. Mother Nature's doing a magnificent job of holding off on the rains, but we also need to be really careful about how we plan and how we use our local runoffs. Our land development regulations are something that we really need to sort of address. There are local initiatives that are taking over large swaths of agricultural land that we really have to be careful of how we permit future land use to be developed. And I think that that's something that we all need to be aware of and we need to push. And I'm looking forward to being your river keeper and giving more of these updates. Thanks very much. Are there any other local announcements or member announcements? I see somebody from the Marine Resources Council. Do you want to say something about?
Something I would mention.
Let me get you on the record.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think so.
My name's Ken Parks. Thank you for letting me speak. We have a low impact development conference coming up October 21st and 22nd in Rockledge. And you had a wonderful showing from this area at the first conference last year. And we just hope that you're getting that information and that you'll join us. As people left last year, there were over 200 people at the conference. Most were from municipalities along the lagoon. What they said is they needed the toolkit to make the conversion to low impact development. That will be presented by the University of Florida, Dr. Eben Bean, at the conference. So it'll actually be the instructions of how to make the conversion to low impact development. We have many examples of municipalities that are moving forward with their plans and their conversions. So look forward to visiting. Yes, it is. Thank you very much, Jackie.
Lisa's going to make a presentation.
Yeah, Dr. Lisa Soto, at the invitation of the county commission, or excuse me, the city commission, will be presenting on August 8th here on the topic of low impact development. One other thing I want to mention, November 4th at our annual celebration that we have up in Melbourne Beach, we'll be inducting the first Legends of the Indian River Lagoon. That will be a hall of fame of, you know, the people and the projects and the groups that will be long remembered. So we'll be reaching out to you for nominees for that very soon. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you all. Have a fantastic August.